I am Blaine, 32 years old, and despite my corner office downtown, I somehow always end up feeling like an outsider in my own family. When the gold embossed invitation arrived for my parents' 40th anniversary dinner, I was genuinely excited. That excitement lasted until I arrived and discovered I would be sitting at the kids' table while my married siblings joined the adults. So I quietly left. 4 hours later, my phone exploded with desperate calls. Let me drop the full story. Before I jump into what happened, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt underappreciated by family members who should know better. The story of why I ended up walking out of my parents' anniversary dinner starts long before that night. Growing up, there was always a clear hierarchy in our household. My older brother Trevor, 38, and my sister Natalie, 36, received the lion's share of attention and praise, especially after they got married. I chose a different path, focusing on my career rather than rushing to settle down with someone. Despite graduating with honors from a prestigious business school and climbing the corporate ladder at record speed, my achievements always seemed to fall short in my parents' eyes. They come from a generation that values traditional milestones, marriage, children, and a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. My corner office investment portfolio and international business trips might as well have been monopoly money to them. Last winter, I reached a major milestone when I was promoted to Vice President of Operations at my company. At 32, I was the youngest VP in company history. When I called my parents with the news, my father responded with a lukewarm, "That's nice, son," before quickly changing the subject to ask if I was dating anyone serious. That same week, my sister Natalie got a small promotion at her part-time job, and my parents threw her a surprise celebration dinner. My brother Trevor works in insurance sales. He's good at what he does, but his career has followed a standard trajectory. Yet when he closed a deal that was slightly above average last year, my father proudly announced it to everyone at Thanksgiving dinner. When I mentioned securing a multi-million-dollar contract for my company the same day, my mother patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear. But did you hear that Trevor and Jessica are thinking about having another baby?" Despite these patterns, I recently bought a luxury condo in the most desirable part of downtown. The floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic view of the city skyline, and I decorated it with the help of an interior designer. I thought perhaps this tangible sign of success would finally register with my parents, but when they visited for the first time, my mother's primary comment was that the guest room would make a lovely nursery someday. For all their dismissal of my accomplishments, I still held out hope that someday they would see my worth. So, when the invitation arrived for their 40th anniversary celebration, embossed in gold lettering on heavy cream cardstock, I was genuinely excited. The event would be held at their home, but the invitation specified formal attire, indicating this would be no casual family gathering. I marked my calendar immediately and sent a positive RSVP. In the weeks leading up to the dinner, I shopped for the perfect anniversary gift. I settled on an exquisite crystal decanter set that cost nearly $2,000, hoping the thoughtful present would show how much I valued their milestone. I also purchased a new suit for the occasion, midnight blue, with subtle pinstripes tailored to fit perfectly. The morning of the anniversary dinner, I felt optimistic. Perhaps this celebration would be the turning point in my relationship with my parents. Maybe my success would finally be acknowledged alongside my siblings' more traditional life choices. After all, I was an accomplished professional with a corner office, financial security, and a beautiful home. Surely that counted for something even without a wedding ring on my finger. As I polished my shoes and adjusted my tie that evening, I rehearsed conversations in my head. I would ask thoughtful questions about their 40 years together. I would be gracious and engaging with all the guests. I would be the son they could be proud of, ring or no ring. With the carefully wrapped gift box on the passenger seat beside me, I drove to my parents' house with high expectations for the evening ahead. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style house precisely at 6:30, the time specified on the invitation. Their circular driveway was already filled with cars, forcing me to park on the street. String lights had been wrapped around the oak trees, lining the walkway, creating a warm glow that led to the front door. The door was adorned with a large ruby red, 40 decoration, surrounded by gold and white balloons. As I approached carrying my heavy gift box, I could hear laughter and conversation from inside. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in, immediately greeted by the elegant transformation of my childhood home. The entryway featured a photo display of my parents throughout their 40 years, together professionally arranged on an antique table alongside dozens of long-stemmed roses. A hired server in black and white attire offered me a glass of champagne from a silver tray. My Aunt Patricia spotted me first. "Blaine, darling," she exclaimed, kissing both my cheeks. "Don't you look dashing in that suit? How's life treating you in that fancy high-rise of yours?" Her genuine interest in my life was refreshing, and we chatted briefly about my recent business trip to Singapore before my Uncle Robert joined us. "There's our corporate hotshot," Uncle Robert said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Your father tells me you're breaking records at that company of yours. Knew you had it in you, since you were knee-high." This surprised me. I had no idea my father discussed my career accomplishments with extended family. I scanned the room for my parents, finally spotting them near the dining room entrance. My mother wore an elegant silver gown that complemented her salt and pepper hair, while my father looked distinguished in his tuxedo. I excused myself from my aunt and uncle, making my way toward them with my gift in hand. "Happy anniversary," I said warmly, leaning in to kiss my mother's cheek. She accepted the gesture stiffly, patting my arm. "Blaine, you made it," she said, sounding neither pleased nor displeased. "Your hair's getting a bit long in the back, isn't it?" I forced a smile, turning to my father for a handshake. "Congratulations on 40 years, Dad." He nodded curtly. "Appreciate you coming, son." I extended the gift box toward them. "I wanted to get you something special to mark the occasion." My mother took the package, setting it on a side table already stacked with presents without opening it. "We'll open everything tomorrow. So much to manage tonight." Their lukewarm reception stung, but I maintained my composure. "Can I help with anything?" "Everything's under control," my father replied, his eyes already drifting over my shoulder to greet someone else. Taking the hint, I moved toward the dining room to see the setup. The large formal dining table had been extended to its full length, easily seating 20 people. Fine china gleamed on a crisp white tablecloth with elaborately folded napkins and multiple crystal glasses at each place setting. Name cards, in gold calligraphy, marked each seat. I circled the table, looking for my name among the cards. After checking each one, I realized my name wasn't there. Confused, I stepped back, noticing for the first time a separate room just off the dining area. Through the doorway, I could see another table, smaller and less elaborately set. A catering staff member was arranging chairs around it. "Make sure there are enough booster seats at the kids' table," I overheard my mother instructing the caterer. "My grandchildren and the younger nieces and nephews will be sitting there along with Blaine." The caterer nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Walker. We've set up 8 places at the children's table as requested." I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment. Before I could process this information, the front door opened again, and my sister Natalie entered with her husband Greg and their 2 children. My mother's face lit up as she hurried to greet them, embracing her grandchildren with enthusiasm that had been notably absent when I arrived. "The guests of honor are here," she announced, taking my 5-year-old niece Emma's hand. "Don't you look beautiful in your party dress?" Minutes later, my brother Trevor arrived with his wife Jessica and their 7-year-old son Lucas. Again, my parents rushed to welcome them with warm hugs and excited chatter. I watched as my mother personally took their coats, and my father poured them each a glass of the special anniversary champagne he had imported from France. "Trevor, Jessica, we've seated you next to the Hendersons," my mother informed them. "You remember John is the hospital board director. Jessica, I thought you two would have a lot to talk about, given your nursing career." I stood awkwardly by the appetizer table, munching on a stuffed mushroom and trying to mask my disappointment. Despite my earlier optimism, nothing had changed. My siblings with their traditional life choices remained the stars of the family, while I was an afterthought, literally relegated to sit with the children despite my professional accomplishments and adult status. Still, I tried to maintain a positive attitude. Perhaps the seating arrangement was due to space limitations. Maybe my mother had a logical explanation that had nothing to do with my unmarried status. I decided to enjoy the evening regardless. Making conversation with cousins and family friends, while waiting for dinner to be announced. The cocktail hour stretched pleasantly, as I circulated among guests, catching up with relatives I hadn't seen in months or years. My cousin Diana, a professor at a state university, engaged me in an interesting conversation about international business ethics, a refreshing change from the usual family gathering small talk. "I've been following your company's expansion into Southeast Asian markets," she remarked. "The approach you've taken with local partnerships is fascinating from both business and cultural perspectives." Pleased that someone recognized my professional world, I elaborated on our recent projects. "We've found that respecting local business customs while maintaining our core values has opened doors that would have remained closed with a more aggressive approach." Our conversation was interrupted when my father appeared at my elbow. "Diana, I believe your husband is looking for you," he said, effectively dismissing her. Once she left, he turned to me. "You should mingle more, son. The Johnsons brought their daughter Amanda tonight. She's a teacher, I believe. Still single." I suppressed a sigh. "Dad, I'm not looking to be set up right now. My schedule is packed with the Singapore project launch." He frowned slightly. "There's more to life than work, Blaine. By your age, I had already been married to your mother for 10 years and had 2 children. Before I could respond, he walked away to join a group of his golf buddies. I finished my champagne in one swallow, suddenly wishing I had declined the invitation altogether. I made my way to the bar for another drink where I encountered my brother Trevor. He was in the middle of telling the bartender and 2 captivated family friends about his recent sales achievement. Biggest commission check of the quarter, he boasted, not acknowledging my presence. The regional manager said they're considering me for the divisional sales award. "That's great, Trev," I said, sincerely, finally catching his attention. "Congratulations." He turned, seeming to notice me for the first time. "Oh, Blaine, yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. Jessica and I are thinking about using the bonus to add a sunroom to the house." He paused, then added with a hint of condescension, "How's the apartment working out?" "It's a condo, actually," I corrected him mildly. "And it's great. I just closed on a vacation property in Aspen, too. The company's annual winter retreat is there, so it made sense to invest." Trevor's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise or annoyance. "Well, that's the benefit of only having yourself to worry about, I guess. No college funds to save for." He clapped me on the shoulder and walked away before I could respond. At 7:30, a small crystal bell rang, and my mother appeared in the center of the living room. "If I could have everyone's attention," she called out. "Dinner is served, and we'd like to invite you all to take your seats. We've arranged place cards at the main table for our adult guests." Guests began moving toward the dining room, and I followed still, hoping there had been some mistake about my assigned seating. My mother continued her announcement as people found their places. "For our younger guests, we've set up a lovely table in the sunroom where they can enjoy their meal without the boring adult conversations." This elicited polite laughter from the assembled guests. I hesitated at the dining room entrance, watching, as my siblings and their spouses located their name cards at the main table. Perhaps mine had been overlooked earlier. I approached my mother, who was directing guests to their seats. "Mom," I said quietly, "I don't seem to have a place card." She looked momentarily flustered. "Oh, Blaine, you'll be sitting at the other table with the children. We needed the main table for all the married couples." He blinked, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me." My mother lowered her voice, glancing around to ensure others weren't listening. "Don't make a scene, please. We arranged the seating based on family units. Since you're not married, we thought you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on the kids during dinner." The logical part of my brain registered that my cousins Riley and Jordan, both in their mid-20s and also unmarried, were seated at the main table. So were my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert's neighbors, whom I'd just met for the first time tonight. This wasn't about space limitations or family units. It was about my perceived status as less than a full adult because I lacked a wedding ring. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level, despite my rising anger. "I'm being seated with 5-year-olds because I'm single at 32. My mother's lips tightened. "It's not just about being single, Blaine. It's about maturity and life stages. Trevor and Natalie have adult responsibilities, mortgages, children, community involvement. And my vice presidency at a global corporation doesn't qualify as an adult responsibility? I asked incredulously. She waved a dismissive hand. That's just a job, dear. Family is what makes someone truly grown up. She turned to greet another guest, clearly considering the matter settled. I stood frozen in place, a hurricane of emotions swirling inside me. Humiliation burned my cheeks as I glanced around, wondering if everyone had heard, if they all knew I'd been deemed unworthy of the adult table. Anger pulsed through my veins at the unfairness of being judged solely on my marital status rather than my character or accomplishments. But deeper than these immediate reactions was a profound sadness, the realization that my parents would never see me as successful on my own terms. My father appeared beside my mother. Is there a problem? He asked, his tone carrying a warning. Mom says, I'm sitting at the children's table, I stated flatly. He nodded, unsurprised. That's right. Someone needs to supervise the youngsters, and since you don't have a spouse to converse with, it made sense. Uncle Richard doesn't have a spouse, I pointed out. Aunt Margaret passed away last year. He's sitting at the main table. That's different, my father replied stiffly. He was married for 37 years. He's established. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't a one-time seating arrangement. It was a perfect representation of my permanent place in the family hierarchy forever, the child regardless of my age or achievements, until I fulfilled their specific definition of adulthood by marrying. My mother mistook my silence for acceptance. The kids are already seated in the sunroom. There's a special menu for them, chicken fingers and such. Though I made sure they prepared an adult meal for you. She patted my arm condescendingly, before turning back to her other guests. I gazed around the room one last time. My sister Natalie caught my eye from her place at the main table, a flicker of what might have been sympathy crossing her face, before she looked away, unwilling to challenge the status quo. My brother Trevor didn't even look up, engrossed in conversation with the person next to him. No one was going to speak up for me. And in that moment, I realized I needed to speak up for myself, not with angry words or a public confrontation that would only cement their view of me as immature, but with the quiet dignity of setting a boundary. As the remaining guests found their seats at the main table, I stood in the threshold between the dining room and the sunroom, observing both scenes. In the elegant dining room, candles flickered against crystal glasses, and adults engaged in animated conversation. In the sunroom, my young nieces and nephews sat at a table covered with a plastic tablecloth, coloring on paper placemats, while waiting for their chicken fingers. My teenage cousin Ryan, 15, noticed me first. Are you sitting with us too? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. I thought this was just for kids under 18. Apparently not, I replied quietly, making a quick decision. But actually, Ryan, I need to head out. Already, he looked surprised. But dinner hasn't even started. I lowered my voice so only he could hear. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away from situations that don't respect you. When you're older, you'll understand. He nodded slowly, a glimmer of recognition in his eyes, suggesting he might already understand more than I realized. I discreetly retrieved my coat from the hall closet and picked up my gift from the side table, where my mother had placed it unopened. No one noticed. As I slipped out the front door, they were all too engaged in the celebration, beginning in the dining room, the clink of glasses, and murmur of conversation, covering the sound of my departure. The night air felt cool against my flushed face as I walked to my car. I placed the gift box on the passenger seat, no longer feeling the pride and anticipation I had when I arrived. Instead of driving away immediately, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, processing what had just happened. For 32 years, I had sought approval from parents who measured success by a yardstick I wasn't interested in using. My career achievements, financial independence, personal growth, none of it registered because it didn't fit their narrow definition of adulthood. The kids' table wasn't just a seating arrangement, it was a symbol of how they would always see me until I conformed to their expectations. As I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward my downtown condo, a strange calm settled over me. The initial sting of humiliation faded, replaced by something unexpected: relief. For years I had contorted myself trying to earn recognition that was never forthcoming. Tonight's incident had finally made it clear. that their approval wasn't just difficult to obtain, it was being deliberately withheld as leverage to pressure me into the life path they preferred. Arriving home, I placed the anniversary gift on my kitchen counter and loosened my tie. The floor-to-ceiling windows of my living room showcased the glittering city skyline lights twinkling like stars against the night sky. I poured myself 2 fingers of an aged scotch from my personal collection and stood by the window, sipping slowly as I considered my next steps. My phone buzzed with a text message from my cousin Diana. "Noticed you disappeared." Everything okay? I appreciated her concern, but wasn't ready to explain. I turned my phone to silent mode and placed it face down on the coffee table. Whatever fallout came from my departure, I would deal with it tomorrow. Tonight was for reclaiming my dignity and reflecting on the patterns that had defined my family relationships for too long. Changing into comfortable clothes, I settled onto my couch with a leather-bound journal I rarely used. Something about this evening demanded documentation, not just what happened, but how it made me feel and what it revealed about my family dynamic. I began writing, chronicling not just tonight's events, but years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that my life choices made me somehow less than my siblings. As I wrote, a pattern emerged more clearly than ever before. My parents had always used their approval as a tool to shape their children's behavior. My siblings had followed the prescribed path and received abundant affirmation. I had chosen differently and been subtly punished ever since. The kids' table was merely the most literal manifestation of a message they'd been sending for years: conform or be excluded. The realization brought a surprising sense of freedom. If their approval was conditional on sacrificing my own life choices, perhaps it wasn't worth having. Maybe it was time to stop measuring my worth through their eyes and fully embrace the path I had chosen for myself. I closed the journal around midnight, feeling mentally exhausted but somehow lighter. Before going to bed, I checked my phone. 7 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and several text messages from various family members asking where I'd gone. I silenced the ringer completely and placed the phone in a drawer. Whatever they wanted to say could wait until I was ready to hear it. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months, unburdened by the weight of seeking validation where it would never be freely given. Something had shifted inside me, a recognition that I deserved respect not because of relationship status or conformity to traditional milestones, but simply because I was an accomplished adult worthy of basic dignity. The quiet departure that my family likely saw as impulsive or immature had actually been the most adult decision I could have made, choosing self-respect over painful accommodation of others' limited perspectives. As I drifted to sleep, I realized that sometimes walking away isn't an act of surrender. It's an act of profound self-affirmation. After a night of surprisingly restful sleep, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. For a moment, I felt disoriented, as if something significant had changed. Then the events of the previous evening came flooding back: the anniversary dinner, the kids' table, my quiet exit. Rather than the renewed anger I expected, I felt strangely calm and clear-headed. My first instinct was to check my phone, but I resisted, choosing instead to maintain the boundary I had established by leaving the device in the drawer overnight. This morning would be for me, not for managing family drama. I made myself a proper breakfast, something I rarely took time for on weekdays, brewing fresh coffee and cooking a vegetable omelet instead of grabbing a protein bar on the way to the office. As I ate, I gazed out at the city below, bustling with Monday morning energy. I had taken the day off work for what I assumed would be a family brunch following the anniversary celebration. Now that time was mine again, and I intended to use it thoughtfully. After breakfast, I finally retrieved my phone, bracing myself for the aftermath. The screen showed 23 missed calls, 11 from my mother, 6 from my father, 3 from Natalie, 2 from Trevor, and 1 from Aunt Patricia. The voicemail icon indicated 17 new messages. There were also numerous texts, ranging from my mother's frantic, "Where are you? Call immediately," to my brother's more accusatory, "Way to ruin the night." Real mature. Rather than diving into the messages, I set the phone aside again and pulled out my journal. Something about putting pen to paper helped clarify my thoughts in a way that digital communication couldn't match. I began writing about patterns and boundaries, about what healthy family relationships should look like, and about what I needed moving forward. Mid-morning, I decided some physical activity would help process my emotions. I changed into workout clothes and headed to the building's state-of-the-art fitness center, which was empty at this hour on a weekday. As I ran on the treadmill, increasing the incline to challenge myself, I found myself thinking about the family dynamics I had accepted for so long without question. Why had I continued to seek validation from people who consistently moved the goalposts? Why did I allow my worth to be determined by someone else's arbitrary standards rather than my own accomplishments? With each stride, I felt stronger, not just physically, but emotionally, recognizing that I had the power to redefine these relationships on my terms. After my workout and a shower, I felt hungry again and decided to order from my favorite local restaurant, not as emotional eating, but as a deliberate act of self-care. While waiting for the delivery, I finally listened to the first few voicemails. My mother's initial message was confused. "Blaine, where did you go? We're about to cut the anniversary cake." The second was concerned. "Are you feeling ill? No one saw you leave." By the third, concern had morphed into indignation. "I can't believe you would just disappear from our anniversary dinner without a word. Call me back immediately." My father's messages were more direct. "Son, your mother is upset. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way. Call us." And later, "Blaine, this childish behavior is exactly why we seated you with the younger ones. Call your mother. Now." That last message confirmed what I had already suspected. They didn't see the problem with their actions, only with my response to them. I deleted the remaining messages without listening, not yet ready for more of the same. Instead, I called the one person who had always understood my position in the family, my college roommate and best friend, Marcus. They did what Marcus exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Put you at the kids' table at 32 with your job title. That's beyond insulting, man." His immediate validation was like a bomb. "I just walked out," I told him. "Didn't make a scene, just left." "Good for you," Marcus said firmly. "About time you stood up to their nonsense. Your family's been treating you like you're failing at life when you're crushing it by any objective measure. Just because you haven't followed their 1,950 seconds life script doesn't make you less successful." We talked for nearly an hour, with Marcus sharing similar stories of his own traditional family's pressure and how he had established boundaries over time. "It's not easy," he admitted. "There will be pushback. They'll try to make you feel guilty, immature, selfish, anything, to get you back in line. Stay strong." Just as we were wrapping up our conversation, my phone indicated another incoming call, this time from my Aunt Patricia. Unlike my parents, she had only called once, which suggested she might have a different perspective on the situation. I decided to answer. "Blaine, dear," she began, her voice warm but cautious, "I wanted to check on you. I noticed you weren't at the kids' table during dinner, and your mother was quite flustered." "I'm sure she was," I replied neutrally. "Aunt Patricia, did you know they seated me there because I'm not married?" A pause, then a sigh. "I suspected as much. I overheard your mother talking to the caterer earlier. I should have said something." "It's not your responsibility," I assured her. "Perhaps not, but I understand how you feel more than you might realize. Your Uncle Robert and I didn't marry until we were in our 40s, and I spent many family functions being treated as less than a full adult because of it. Your grandmother once seated me at the children's table at Thanksgiving when I was 38. This revelation surprised me. I never knew that. It was a different time, but the attitude persists in some families, including ours apparently." She paused. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice by leaving quietly rather than creating a scene. It sends a clearer message about how seriously you take yourself and how seriously you expect to be taken by others." Her understanding brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I've been second-guessing myself." Don't. Sometimes the family we're born into needs to be trained on how to treat us. It took years with your grandmother, but eventually she came around. Just be prepared. Your parents may take some time to understand the message you've sent. After talking with Aunt Patricia, I felt validated in my decision, but also more prepared for the difficult conversations ahead. As evening approached, I finally turned my attention to my email, responding to work matters that couldn't wait until tomorrow. Maintaining my professional responsibilities felt grounding amidst the personal turmoil. Around 7, I decided to check my text messages again. Among the family communications was an unexpected message from my teenage cousin Ryan. "Thanks for what you said before you left. My parents are always telling me what I should do with my life too. It was cool to see someone stand up for themselves without making a huge deal about it." His message touched me deeply. I hadn't considered that my quiet exit might serve as an example for someone else in the family who felt similarly constrained by expectations. Perhaps by establishing my own boundaries, I was helping create space for others to do the same. As I prepared for bed that evening, I reviewed the journal entries I had made throughout the day. The hurt and anger were still present, but they no longer dominated my emotional landscape. Instead, I felt a growing sense of purpose and clarity. Tomorrow I would need to respond to my family in some way, but tonight I had given myself the gift of reflection and self-care, something I realized had been missing in my constant pursuit of external validation. I fell asleep that night with a plan forming for how to address the situation directly without allowing myself to be drawn back into old patterns. The kids' table incident had been a catalyst, but the changes I needed to make in my family relationships had been necessary for years. Sometimes it takes a public humiliation to crystallize what was wrong all along, and to provide the clarity needed to finally address it. Tuesday morning arrived with the insistent buzzing of my phone. Glancing at the screen I saw, it was my mother calling for what must have been the 30th time since Sunday night. After 2 days of radio silence, I decided it was time to engage, but on my terms, not theirs. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Mom." "Blaine Alexander Walker," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with indignation. "How dare you ignore our calls for nearly 2 days? We've been worried sick about you." "I'm fine," I replied calmly. I needed time to process what happened at the anniversary dinner. "What happened?" "You disappeared without a word. You embarrassed us. In front of all our guests. Your father had to make excuses for your absence during the toasts." I noticed she made no mention of the kids' table, the actual issue that had prompted my departure. "Mom, I left because I was seated at the children's table while other adults, including unmarried ones, were seated at the main table." "Oh, that," she dismissed. "You're being overly sensitive. Someone needed to supervise the children, and since you don't have a spouse or children of your own, it made logical sense." It wasn't logical. It was hurtful and disrespectful to my status as an adult. I'm 32 years old, with a successful career and independent life. Being unmarried doesn't make me a child. My mother's voice hardened. This is exactly the kind of self-centered attitude that confirms you still have growing up to do. A mature adult would have accepted the seating arrangement graciously rather than storming off like a teenager. I didn't storm off. I corrected her. I left quietly, without creating a scene. And I'm not discussing this further over the phone. If you and Dad want to talk, you can come to my condo this evening at 6. But I need you to understand that the conversation will be about mutual respect going forward, not about convincing me I was wrong to remove myself from a humiliating situation. After a moment of stunned silence, she agreed, apparently surprised by my firm boundary setting. The call ended shortly after, and I turned my attention to work, knowing the evening would require all my emotional energy. At exactly 6, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find both my parents standing there, my father looking stern and my mother appearing uncharacteristically nervous. I invited them in, offering drinks, which they declined, and we sat in my living room with the city skyline as backdrop. "This is quite a view," my father commented, seemingly reluctant to dive into the real purpose of their visit. "Thank you," I replied simply, not falling into our usual pattern of me eagerly accepting any scrap of approval. "But we should address why you're here." My mother jumped in immediately. "We're here because your behavior Sunday night was unacceptable, leaving a family celebration without a word." I held up my hand. "Mom, we need to start with what happened before I left. I was seated at a table with children instead of with other adults. I need to understand why you thought that was appropriate." My father cleared his throat. "Son, family events require organization. Decisions need to be made about who sits where. And those decisions revealed exactly how you see me. I replied evenly. As less than a full adult, because I'm not married. That's not fair, my mother protested. We've always supported your career. With polite disinterest at best, I countered. My accomplishments are footnotes in family conversations, while Trevor and Natalie receive celebration dinners for minor achievements. The kids' table was just the most obvious manifestation of a pattern that's existed for years. My father's expression darkened. So you left our anniversary dinner, causing your mother distress on her special night because you felt underappreciated. That sounds remarkably self-centered. I maintained my calm. I left because I was presented with a clear message about my place in this family, and I chose not to accept it. This isn't about one night or one seating arrangement. It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than my siblings because my life choices don't match your expectations. What expectations? My mother asked defensively. We just want you to be happy. You want me to be happy in ways you recognize and approve of, I clarified. When I express happiness about my career achievements, you change the subject to relationships. When I share news about my home purchase, you immediately frame it in terms of its potential for a future family. My actual life, the one I've built and am proud of, doesn't seem to count. A heavy silence fell over the room. My father stared out the window while my mother twisted her hands in her lap. Finally, my father spoke. We come from a different generation, Blaine. In our day, a man your age would be established with a family. We worry about you being alone. But I'm not alone, I explained. I have close friends fulfilling work community involvement. Being unmarried isn't the same as being isolated or unfulfilled. The problem isn't that I'm alone. It's that you can't see the value in the life I've chosen. My mother's expression softened slightly. We just want what's best for you. No, you want what you think is best for me. I corrected gently. There's a difference. And at 32, I get to decide what's best for myself. We continued talking for nearly 2 hours. The conversation circled through family history expectations and deeply held beliefs about success and fulfillment. My parents struggled to understand my perspective, but seemed genuinely surprised by how profoundly their actions had affected me. I had no idea you felt so. Overlooked, my mother admitted eventually. We're proud of your career, even if we don't always show it well. Actions speak louder than words, I replied. And your actions consistently communicate that my accomplishments don't count because they don't include a wedding ring. My father, who had been quiet for some time, finally spoke up. What exactly do you want from us, Blaine? An apology for the seating arrangement. I want recognition that I'm an adult, deserving of the same respect you give Trevor and Natalie. I want acknowledgement that my life choices are valid, even if they're different from yours. And yes, I want an apology for the kids' table incident, but more importantly, I want a commitment to change the patterns that led to it. My father stood abruptly. I think we've heard enough for tonight. You've given us plenty to think about. His tone made it clear he wasn't ready to concede any points. My mother rose as well, looking torn. We love you, Blaine. I hope you know that. I do, I assured her. But love without respect isn't enough for an adult relationship. I'm not asking for special treatment, just equal treatment. I walked them to the door, maintaining my composure, even as my father's stiff body language signaled his continued resistance to my perspective. As they waited for the elevator, my mother turned back. Will you be at Sunday dinner this weekend? She asked tentatively. I shook my head. Not this week. I need some distance while we all process this conversation. But I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms when you're ready. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, mentally reviewing the conversation. It hadn't gone as well as I'd hoped, but it had gone exactly as I expected. Decades of entrenched family dynamics wouldn't change overnight. What mattered was that I had clearly articulated my boundaries and expectations for the first time, rather than silently accepting treatment that diminished me. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Natalie. Mom and Dad just left your place. They seemed shaken. What happened? I typed carefully. We had an honest conversation about family patterns and respect. Long overdue. Her reply came quickly. They mentioned something about the seating at dinner. Was that really such a big deal? It wasn't about the seating, I responded. It was about what the seating represented: my permanent second-class status in the family because I'm unmarried. There was a long pause before her next message. I never thought about it that way. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the table assignments until dinner started. I should have said something. Her acknowledgement, however, small, felt like the first crack in the family united front. Perhaps this confrontation would lead to more authentic relationships with my siblings as well as my parents. As difficult as the evening had been, I felt a sense of accomplishment in finally addressing directly what had been simmering beneath the surface for years. The path forward wasn't yet clear, but I had taken the crucial first step, standing firmly in my truth, rather than contorting myself to fit others' expectations. Whatever came next, I would face it as the adult I was, regardless of whether my family was ready to see me that way. The weeks following my confrontation with my parents were predictably turbulent. Family members took sides, with most of the older generation supporting my parents' position that I had overreacted to a simple seating arrangement, while some younger cousins and a few aunts and uncles expressed private support for my stance. My brother Trevor called to lecture me about family loyalty and tradition, suggesting I apologize to preserve family harmony. My sister Natalie's response was more nuanced. While she initially defended our parents, our conversation gradually shifted to her, acknowledging that the family had indeed treated me differently because of my unmarried status. I never really thought about it before she admitted during a coffee meeting 10 days after the incident. But looking back, there is a pattern. When you got that huge promotion last year, they barely mentioned it at Thanksgiving. But when Greg got a tiny raise, Mom made his favorite dessert to celebrate. Exactly. I replied, grateful for her willingness to see my perspective. It's not about any single incident. It's about a consistent message that my life choices make me somehow less accomplished or mature than you and Trevor. Natalie looked thoughtful. I guess I benefited from that dynamic, so I never questioned it. She reached across the table to touch my hand briefly. I'm sorry, Blaine. Your career is amazing, and that condo of yours makes my suburban house look positively ordinary. You've built an impressive life on your own terms. That conversation with Natalie marked the first real breakthrough. Though she didn't fully understand my decision to walk away from the anniversary dinner, she respected it enough to stop trying to broker peace without acknowledgement of the underlying issues. My parents maintained their distance for nearly 3 weeks, with only occasional terse text messages checking if I was ready to move past this nonsense. I responded consistently that I was open to rebuilding our relationship whenever they were ready to discuss mutual respect and recognition of my adult status. The unexpected turning point came through my Aunt Patricia. She invited my parents to lunch without telling them she had already spoken with me about the incident. According to her later account, she shared her own experience of being marginalized as a single-career woman in the family years ago. I told them how it felt to be treated as incomplete despite all my professional accomplishments, she explained when she called to update me. And I pointed out that they're at risk of damaging their relationship with you permanently over outdated notions of what makes someone a successful adult. Whether it was Aunt Patricia's intervention, the extended time for reflection, or simply missing my presence in their lives, my mother called the following day with a different tone. Blaine. She began, her voice lacking its usual, authoritative edge. Your father and I have been doing some thinking. We'd like to have you over for dinner this Saturday, just the 3 of us. No kids' table, she added, with what sounded like an attempt at humor. I accepted the invitation with cautious optimism. When I arrived at their house that Saturday, I was surprised to find the dining room table set for 3, with their best china, a silent acknowledgement of my adult status that didn't escape my notice. The conversation started awkwardly, but gradually warmed as we cautiously navigated around the sensitive topics that had divided us. After dinner, as my father poured coffee, he cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been talking a lot about what you said, about feeling that we value your siblings' life choices more than yours. He paused, clearly uncomfortable but pressing forward. It wasn't intentional, but, looking back, I can see how our actions may have given that impression. Coming from my father, this was tantamount to a full apology. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We are proud of you, Blaine. Your work ethic, your independence, the way you've built your life on your terms, these are admirable qualities. We may not always understand your choices, but we do respect them. Or at least we're learning to. That's all I've wanted, I told them, honestly. Not special treatment, just equal recognition that my path is valid, even if it's different. We talked more openly that evening than we had in years. I learned that my parents' emphasis on marriage stemmed partly from their own insecurities. Their generation measured parental success by their children's adherence to traditional milestones. My career achievements, while impressive, didn't give them the same social currency among their peers as wedding photos and grandchildren. Understanding their perspective didn't make their behavior right, but it helped me approach reconciliation with more empathy. We agreed to a fresh start with clearer communication and explicit recognition of my accomplishments alongside those of my siblings. The healing wasn't instantaneous. At the next family gathering, a casual barbecue at Trevor's house, there were still moments of tension and old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. But when my mother began to interrupt my story about a successful international negotiation to ask if I'd met anyone interesting lately, she caught herself mid-sentence. "Sorry," she said with a small smile. "Please continue telling us about the Singapore deal. It sounds fascinating." That small moment of self-correction meant more than any grand declaration could have. Over the following months, my relationships within the family gradually transformed. My brother Trevor initially remained distant, viewing my boundary setting as a criticism of his life choices. But after I made a point of genuinely celebrating his achievements at work without comparison to my own, he slowly warmed again. My sister Natalie and I developed a closer bond than we'd had since childhood. She confided that my standing up to our parents had inspired her to assert herself more in her own marriage and parenting decisions rather than defaulting to family expectations. My teenage cousin Ryan perhaps benefited most from the ripple effects of that anniversary dinner walkout. At a family gathering 6 months later, he sought me out to share that he had decided to pursue art school instead of the business degree his parents had planned for him. "After seeing you live your life your way despite the pressure, I realized I could do the same," he told me. "My parents weren't happy at first, but we're working through it." As for my relationship with my parents, it evolved into something more authentic than the approval-seeking dynamic that had defined it for decades. We disagreed, sometimes misunderstood each other occasionally, but addressed issues directly instead of through passive-aggressive signals about my place in the family hierarchy. The anniversary dinner incident, painful as it was at the time, ultimately served as the catalyst for growth that had been needed for years. By quietly walking away from the kids' table, I had finally claimed my seat at the adult table of life, not the physical dining arrangement, but the metaphorical place where I could engage as an equal, respected for my choices, rather than diminished by them. The most profound lesson from the experience wasn't about family dynamics specifically, but about the broader principle of self-validation. For too long, I had measured my worth through others' recognition, particularly my parents. The kids' table incident forced me to decide whether I would continue seeking external validation or finally definitively validate myself. Choosing the latter changed everything. While reconciliation with my family was a positive outcome, the real victory was internal, the liberation that came from defining success on my own terms and requiring others to respect those terms if they wanted a relationship with me. Sometimes, the most powerful statement isn't made with passionate speeches or dramatic confrontations, but with a quiet, dignified exit when your boundaries are crossed. Walking away from that anniversary dinner was the most self-respecting choice I could have made, and ultimately, it led to more authentic relationships than years of accommodation ever could have. If you've ever found yourself seeking validation from people who consistently withhold it, or compromising your dignity to maintain harmony, remember that you always have the power to politely excuse yourself from tables where you're not properly valued. Creating your own table surrounded by people who recognize your worth isn't selfish. It's necessary for a fulfilling life. Have you ever had to walk away from a family situation to protect your dignity? What boundaries have you set with relatives who don't respect your life choices? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most profound growth comes from the moments when we quietly choose self-respect over painful accommodation. Thank you for listening to my story.